meeting for the November ordinary meeting of Council. We're having a number of conflicts of interest going to be declared about items in advance of the meeting next week, so I might just go around the room, might be the easiest way to do that. Start with you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Trevor. Councillor Hotels. Thank you. Councillor McPhee.
Mine's T2. I've got a declarable conflict, but I am choosing to stay in the room.
Oh, sorry, can I remind everybody to put their mics on?
Mine's on.
Councillor Barnes.
No.
Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Hooper.
T2, and I'll be leaving the room.
T2. Councillor Mitchell.
Mine's H1 and T2. Both of those I will ask to be allowed to stay in the room.
Councillor T2. Thank you very much. Okay, with the conflicts all declared, we'll move on to item E1. Ben.
Morning, Ben.
Councillors will be aware of efforts by the Council to position our region's economy in the rapidly emerging hydrogen space. The reasons for doing this are for economic diversification, to create jobs in sustainable industries such as renewable energy, and also to de-risk our region in terms of the future decarbonisation of the region over time. One way to do this is for Council to play a leadership role in the trial of technologies such as hydrogen technology and hydrogen fuel and vehicles within our fleet. To do that, we've been investigating the opportunity to trial the use of hydrogen in 2 of our garbage trucks as a trial operation to demonstrate how our region can use technologies such as hydrogen fuel as a source of powering our operations in a lower carbon environment. To do that requires Council to approach the market to look at ways for look at suppliers that may be able to provide the technology and the fuel and the know-how to implement those changes into our fleet. So today's item's about a procurement methodology, a 2-stage procurement methodology where we'll be doing EOI, we'll be going to the market to seek information on what that might look like in terms of how we would operationalise hydrogen fuel and vehicles into our fleet. After that, there may be a subsequent RFT inviting suppliers of hydrogen fuel and vehicles into the operations fleet. The recommendation today is that pursuant to section 2283A of the Local Government Regulations 2012, the Council will invite open public expressions of interest before inviting written tenders for the trial supply of hydrogen-powered garbage trucks and fuel. The trial supply of hydrogen-powered garbage trucks and fuel within Council's fleet will be a new and innovative venture by Council that will support the establishment of a local hydrogen supply chain. Integration of hydrogen into Council's fleet will rely upon new market technology and equipment that is relatively untested or proven in a commercial application. The proposed 2-stage procurement process will assist Council in reducing Council's risks by ensuring any RFT is shaped by market input that best meets Council's operational requirements. The assessment criteria for the initial EOI will focus on suppliers who demonstrate technology and supply arrangement that meets the requirements, particularly around safety, value for money and environmental responsibilities.
Thanks, Ben. Comments or questions? Councillor Barnes.
Just a question, Ben. Are there any opportunities to partner with LGAQ or another local government so that everyone shares the costs on this?
It's possible, but we haven't explored that as an option in this recommendation today.
The council feels that I can see other councils wanting to go down this track as well. I'm just wondering whether we can partnership up with somebody at a later stage.
Yeah, there are a lot of councils looking at hydrogen and opportunities. This is a really unique supply arrangement that we're considering for our council. But I think if our trial is successful, other councils will sort of follow our way, and we'll be able to work with them on a broader, an expanded, project in partnership with other local governments.
Possible to get in contact with the LGAQ and just find out whether they're looking at something.
Yeah,
I'm happy to support.
Yep. Yeah, we're part of ongoing discussions with LGAQ. They've got a hydrogen group that talks regularly around this matter. So they're aware of what we're doing, we're aware of some of the conversations they're having across Queensland, which help shape some of the thinking here. Townsville being an example that we're talking to.
Thanks, Ben.
Sorry, just to add to
Yep.
that. Yeah, just to add to that, I know the councillor has, through health or other reasons, hasn't been able to attain a number of meetings. There was actually a motion that this council, as one of the only 77 councils in Queensland, took to the state conference, the LGAQ, about preparing business case and opportunities for hydrogen, and asking the state and the federal government to assist so we can have a broad spectrum of hydrogen rollout across the whole of Queensland. We've had a number of meetings in relation to that, a number of discussions from other councillors that in relation to the procurement, the supply and the construct of vehicles as well. That certainly has gone around. I note the interest of the councillor, but a number of those matters have been addressed at length and times before.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Councillor Honour.
Would it be a true statement to say that we're centrally positioned to supply fuel technology to major industry from here in Bundaberg?
Yeah, I think that'd be accurate. We've got potentially the vehicle supply assembly capability in our region to produce vehicles, but in terms of the biomass and the other attributes required, natural attributes required to produce hydrogen, we're also well positioned in that regard.
Any other questions or comments to Ben? No? Okay, thanks, Ben. The next item is our financial summary as at 1 November. Welcome, Jody, in the absence of Simon and Doug. Hot seat.
Morning.
Okay, good morning everyone. This morning I'm presenting item F1, which is the financial summary as at the 1st of November 2021. This is a requirement under the local government regulations to present a monthly report to council. The recommendation is that the financial summary for the 1st of November be noted by council. A few points to note as per attachment 1, just looking at the recurrent revenue section. For fees and charges, development activity within the region is continuing to drive revenues higher than anticipated. Airport revenue is still affected by travel restrictions and is lower than budgeted. However, this is offset by holiday park occupancies, which remain high. The revenue section is also showing proceeds from sale of developed land, which relates to 3 parcels of land sold this year. And there are further lots under conditional contracts. Just moving on to recurrent expenditure. Employee costs are tracking well compared to budget and will continue to be closely monitored. Materials and services are generally on budget. There's some annual payments such as insurances which impact on the quarterly comparative figures. However, these will be monitored through the remainder of the year. Just looking at capital expenditure, if we look at figure 4, you'll probably see that as a percentage of the budget, the actuals are actually slightly down. However, this is pretty common for quarter 1. And if we look at figure 3 instead, we can see that the year-to-date expenditure is actually tracking closely to the forecast spending pattern for this time of year. Capital grants are pretty much on track. Probably the only thing to note there is that there was a successful grant application for the Anzac Pool redevelopment. Just moving on to the cash balances, that was all pretty much on track as forecast. There's a relatively high balance at the moment, which would be expected coming out of the recent rating period, and there's no short-term liquidity issues foreseeable. And finally, looking at the rates debtor figures, we're sitting at 5.2 million at the end of October. That's probably might be more meaningful to look back to October 2019 before the effects of COVID. At that point, the debtor balance was 6.4 million, so there's definitely an improvement in our collection rate there. And that pretty much covers everything for the financial summary, unless there's some questions from anyone.
Thanks, Jody. Questions or comments? No? Everyone's happy? Thank you very much. We've now got some sale of land and lease items. Christine?
Item G1 is in relation to a sale at the Bundaberg Regional Airport Precinct. It's Lot 8, being 17 Aviation Crescent. These lots have been previously offered for sale through auction or tender, and though were not successful at that point, the lots have subsequently been listed on our council website, and we've had an offer come in which is for market value. The recommendation is that council apply the exception contained in section 2361AI of the local government regulation to that disposal, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a contract with the buyer and attend to all items to finalise that sale.
Thanks, Christine. Questions or comments? Councillor Barnes?
One question. I don't think I was here, but is that an airside allotment or not?
No, it's not. No.
No other comments on that one? No? Okay.
So the next item is G2, which is in regard to 2 lot sales on Buxton Road. It's Lot 3 and Lot 4. Council owns these freehold lots and has previously resolved to sell the lots as their surplus to council's need. That tender wasn't successful and they were listed again for sale on our website. Council's now received offers to purchase both of those lots. The terms of that contract are for market rent, and the recommendation is that council apply the exception contained in section 2361AI, again of the local government regulation, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into the contract with the buyers and attend to all items to finalise the sale.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions? No? All good?
The next item, G3, is in regard to another sale of land. This one's at 15 Hull Street, Buxton. Councillors may recall there was a report recently about the sale of this property. However, that contract was validly terminated or ended by the buyer. Since that time, council's been successful in obtaining a new buyer for the lot, and therefore it's recommended that the council rescind the resolution that was made, being item G1 for the previous sale at the ordinary meeting on the 31st of August, and that council reapply the exception contained in section 2361AI of the local government regulation, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into the contract with the buyer and attend to all items to finalise that sale.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions on that one? No? All good? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mitchell?
Christine, on that matter, was there a deposit paid and was the deposit forfeited?
Yes, there was, and yes, it was.
Thank you very much.
From memory, it was 1,000? Yeah. Sorry, any other on that one? No? G4?
G4 is in regard to a lease at the Bagara Ag Tech Hub. It's for part of the lots. Hillberries is a new commercial strawberry farm that's come to the region, and they're looking for some office space. Council's working towards a commencement date of a lease proposed to be the 1st of December 2021, with the initial term of the lease being for 5 years with a 1 by 5 year option. The rent will be for market value, and the remainder terms of the contract will be as per council's standard commercial lease. It's proposed that the exception contained in section 2361E of the local government regulation be applied, given that the property has previously been offered for lease, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a lease with Hillwood Berries Pty Ltd for part of the Bagara Administration Centre.
I actually like that name better, Hillberries. Thanks, Christine. Any comments or questions? All good, thanks. Then we've got a specialised supply agreement. Stuart.
Good morning, councillors. Councillors, this report is similar to others you've seen recently. We've 8 items of plant in our fleet for which one supplier is the manufacturer's only authorised agent, and as per the recommendation, we're seeking to enter into a supply arrangement with that agent without seeking competitive tenders pursuant to section 235B of the regulations.
Thanks, Stuart. Comments or questions?
Just by way of clarification, and the majority of councils you already know, but that is a local business.
Thank you. All right, coastal sewage strategy.
Councillors, with the ongoing residential growth along the coastal strip and a significant number of unsewered residential properties also in the coastal strip, we've developed a strategy to service the area with sewage, and an assessment of the options has determined that the most viable alternative for us is to connect a diversion from the Pagara plant across to Ribiana sewage treatment plant, and so we're recommending accordingly. And also, as part of the strategy, we're also recommending that we do not commit to a retrofitting program for the unsewered coastal properties.
Thanks, Stuart. Comments or questions? Councillor Barnes and then Councillor Bartels.
Stuart, has this been workshopped at all by councillors?
Yes, it has.
When was that? I'm on this.
Within the last month.
11th of October.
By way of further detail, who both attended that consultation day, and it was workshopped quite extensively.
Was there an option looked at to maybe declaring having a declared zone, like in 10 or 15 years or something, so that people can gradually take over? Just there's a hell of a lot of people on the prime real estate that don't even have articulated sewage system, and we're sort of marketing ourselves as a smart location.
Sure. So I don't recall that particular option was specifically workshopped, but it is certainly one of the options that we had considered in the past. The project itself, if we were to connect all of the currently unsewered properties on the coastal area, it would be a total cost of over $70 million. So it would then become a project that would rival the new aquatic centre as the largest project ever undertaken by council in the region. And at the moment, we just simply don't have the resources to do it.
Yeah, I'm not in a position at this stage to actually debate it, but it equates to about $25,500 per property to connect them to sewer. And I was just wondering whether, like over maybe a 15-year period when people have got on-site treatment plants, septic systems, whether or not they would see that as a viable option when it comes time to renew or whatever, or to add value to their property.
Sure. I suppose I don't dispute those points, but at the moment our recommendation is that we don't commit to any retrofitting program for the unsewered properties.
Councillor Bartels.
As to the portfolio councillor, I'll be presenting this report, and I've had a couple of councillors ask me, could we separate the recommendation into 2 separate motions, if possible, on the day?
Mm-hmm. That's fine, we can do that. What? Councillor Mitchell.
Oh, yes. Stuart, originally in this coastal sewage strategy, there were about 14 properties on Bagara Road that are completely surrounded by sewage, but they're not connected to sewage. It's not available to them at the moment. They are on a main road. They're only a few kilometres from the city centre. They have been extracted from that strategy. How do you foresee that council might be addressing looking at sewering those property or offering the option to connect to sewage?
Yeah, sure. Three of the properties that are involved in that location have since been affected by a development application. So I think the number of unsewered properties will be reduced. But we would then treat them like we have done all requests in the past on a case-by-case basis, where we consult with the properties, we develop up a solution, and then we make an offer to the properties on a financial basis for them to contribute. Generally, we require a significant number of the properties to agree and accept our proposal before we proceed, and then it becomes mandatory for all. What we've found in the past is that it is very difficult to get high levels of agreement, but that would be the process that we would apply again, and that can happen really at any time.
Thanks, Stuart.
So what is the next stage? Have we proceeded in any way to approach the residents of that particular section on Bundaberg Road, or do you want an approach from those residents independently?
Generally, we proceed once we've received a request from the ratepayers to connect.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stuart. Any other comments or questions? No? All good? Thanks, Stuart. Next item is a lease of a hangar. Christine, are you coming back up? Thanks.
This report is in regard to a lease for hangar H2, which is to Skills Compliance Proprietary Limited. Skills Compliance have previously been under a licence agreement with council for the use of that hangar. The licence agreement, given that it doesn't have a long term on it, it's preferable that the parties enter into a lease for a term of 3 years with a further option of additional 3 years, and that arrangement can't be done under a licence agreement. The proposed rent is slightly less than market value, but it's above the community rate. This tenant is deemed to be or considered a community organisation for the purposes of the local government regulation, and therefore the rent can be slightly less than market rent if council chooses to do so. Also, given that they're a community organisation, to dispose of this property by way of lease, it's suggested that the exception contained in section 2361B2 of the local government regulation be applied. The remainder of the lease terms will be on council's standard lease, and rent will increase annually by CPI. The recommendation is that council apply that exception in section 236 of the local government regulation, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a lease with Skills Compliance P2O Ltd for part of the airport land.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions? No, all good. Thank you.
The next item is O2, which is a renewal of lease to the Woodgate Men's Shed. The Woodgate Men's Shed presently have a lease with council which is due to expire in January 2022. The Men's Shed would like to renew their lease for a further 10-year term. The rent is proposed to be at the community rate, and the remainder of the terms will be on council's standard lease. The recommendation to council is that council apply the exception contained in section 2361B2 of the local government regulation for that disposal, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a lease with Woodgate Men's Shed for part of that property.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I just had a question. Why doesn't the term or the term of the lease be noted in the resolution, in the recommendation, as in the amount of years?
It can be. I think that the idea was potentially to not have those on the recommendation purely because there had been some changes, and you'll recall we've had a couple of reports where we've had to come back to council to change the term. If it's preferable for council, I'm happy to add the term of the lease back into the resolutions. It's just further, some negotiations with the clubs may happen after the resolution that's been applied goes through.
But the report says a certain amount of years, and if then there's a negotiation after that's not in line with that report, then we're not aware that that negotiation's ended in a different outcome to what the report has said.
We can add those back in if you prefer, and I'll do that as well for the schools compliance one.
Thank you.
Christine's correct. We actually had one this week come in for variation where council had resolved for 5 years and they want 3 years. So it's just more paperwork and come back to another meeting. But anyway, happy to put it in, but that's the implication. All right, thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
Next one is changes to the regional waste facilities. Gavin.
And I've declared an interest in that conflict, Mr. CEO, so I'll leave for him. If I get my mic off.
Good morning, councillors. Dealing with, as the CEO said, item P1, change to Bundy Region Waste Facility actually opening hours. As councillors are aware, we currently have a waste and recycling strategy that was adopted in 2017 and runs for 8 years, so we're right in the middle of it at the moment. And a couple of the points in that waste strategy was that we would continually review the operation of our waste facilities to ensure that we're providing the most efficient and effective service and best value for money for our community. And so that entails us looking at the sort of waste types that we accept at each one of our waste facilities to minimise the need for unnecessary movement or processing costs, and also to look at the opening hours of our facilities so that they meet the community needs. And we gauge that by continually monitoring how many people attend each one of our facilities on an hourly basis, and usually review those every year. Clearly trying to ensure that we're open at the times when people seem to vote with their feet and attend the facilities, and also to minimise the costs where we can. So this report is a review. We presented it last year, councillors right remember, just before Christmas, and we're asked to come back. Given that there are a couple of new players in the industry, so a couple of commercial businesses that have set up and operated, so they're taking some of the waste products and using those for beneficial reuse, which is, from our perspective, great, and certainly we want to continue to encourage that. But the likes of Greensills, who are taking green waste, and Clydens, who are taking concrete waste, which would otherwise end up at our facilities. So that's obviously had an impact on the volumes that we receive. And it's a two-way street. In some cases, it reduces the revenue we get, but also on the other side, reduces some of the expense that we have in processing or trying to do something with those products other than putting them in the landfill, which then incurs the state waste levy, and we're trying to avoid that unnecessarily if we can. So this report really has gone through every one of our waste facilities to look at current demands based on the review that we did, and proposes a number of changes. So that's crimping times, changing days potentially. I won't go through each one individually because we have discussed this and workshopped it, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Gav. Any questions or comments? There's been one issue raised with me in terms of the closure of Childers on a Sunday. So we might have a further discussion about that during the week, and if there's going to be an amended recommendation, we'll advise council accordingly. Any other comments or questions? No? All good? Thanks, Gav. No late items, Wendy? We'll get Councillor Trevor back. And then we've got 2 items in confidential